All right, for awareness, we are recording this session. This forum is scheduled from 10 a.m. until 12 p.m. All attendees have been muted to avoid background noise, but we do encourage you to actively participate in the session using the question feature. You may ask questions at any time during the presentation by using the Q&A panel. Please do not send questions through the chat as it is not being monitored and may not be seen. To access the Q&A panel, please look at the bottom of your screen. You should see the meeting control bar. If you do not see the control bar, you may need to move your mouse to activate it. From the control bar, you'll select the optional icon, the one with the 3 dots, and select Q&A. This will open up the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. This is where you will type your question to the panelists, and please include your agency name as this provides necessary context for our panelists. We will hold the questions until our designated Q&A section, but please send them in as you think of them. A little disclaimer, we will do our best to answer as many questions as possible during this session. Please understand that some questions may need to be directed back to your agency support contacts, as our Cardinal team cannot provide agency-specific guidance. Such questions would be like your use of chart fields or your agency's policies. Additionally, for questions that require correction mode or our Cardinal post-production support team intervention, we will need to direct you to enter a BCCC ticket. When entering a ticket, remember to put Cardinal as well as the module area in the subject line so it can come to our queue and we can direct it to the appropriate team. All right, and now I will hand it over to Susie Hilton, one of our Cardinal trainers. She will be walking you through a few brief topics and key reminders before we go into our Q&A session with our TA application team members later on in this session.
Good morning and welcome to the Time and Labor Administration Forum. So you've had about just over a week in the system. You've been playing around, you've been getting more comfortable. And so now we wanted to come together to highlight a few topics. We've been getting some tickets in, and so we want to highlight a few of the common things that we're seeing come in as tickets. And then because you've had this time to be in the system, we know that you have some questions for us. So we will have a Q&A time where we will read out your questions that you're submitting through the Q&A panel, and Claire and Kranti are here to answer those questions during that live Q&A portion. So feel free to send your questions in at any point, but just know that we are holding them until the Q&A portion of the webinar. So we're going to start out by taking a look at the time and entry process just as an overview and just to touch on a few reminders. We're also going to talk through some reports to issues. So remember that reports to person is who is approving timesheets. So we're going to talk through some of the common issues that we're seeing and how you can correct those. We're also going to talk about delegation administration. So when that reports to supervisor is away from the office or unable to approve those timesheets, the delegation administrator or that supervisor is able to delegate their work list to another approver. So we're going to talk through that process a little bit and hit on some common mistakes that we're seeing. We're also going to touch on the holiday time entry process since there was just a holiday this week. That is a hot topic for this week, so we do want to remind you about the resources that you have there. The timesheet report is one of those reports that we are constantly directing people to because it just has a wealth of information. And so I know that you went over this in the TA 372 class, but we're going to run that report again as part of a demo just to highlight some of the information that is in that report, just as a reminder. Then we're going to have a few other demos just to highlight a few common mistakes that we are seeing so that you will be better equipped to assist your employees when they come to you with some of these questions. So the demo portion of today is going to consist of 4 different demos that I'm just going to kind of run through to show you to show you and to highlight some key mistakes that we're seeing users make so that you'll be in a better position to assist them. Then we'll pause and we will have that QA session. So all of those questions that you've been sending in throughout the webinar, we will go ahead and address those by reading the questions out and having our panelists answer those verbally. Then we're going to highlight some of the training materials just to recap and remind you of where you can access different materials on the Cardinal Project website. And we will wrap up our webinar with just reviewing some of the additional support that we have available for you. So we'll go ahead and get started with the time entry process. So again, I know that a lot of what we're covering in this forum today is not new information. A lot of what we're covering today is information that you learned through your training courses. But the reason that we are wanting to take some time to review it and kind of to hit it again is just because there are some, frequent tickets that we're seeing that are coming in. So that's why we wanted to take a moment to just review the time entry and approval process really quickly. So the employee or the timekeeper will enter the time on the timesheet. And here is one of our first areas where there are mistakes being made. It's very important that the employees are submitting their timesheet. Very often, they're saving their timesheets, and those timesheets are just going to sit there in a saved status. Because the next step is that the time admin process needs to run. And time admin is only going to pick up those timesheets that have been submitted. So it's very important that employees are submitting their time. So when we look at the timesheet report in a few minutes, we're going to take a look at where you can see whether their timesheet has been submitted or saved. So here, just reminding your employees to submit their timesheets. Next, time admin is going to run. Time admin, the time administration process runs every 2 hours, starting at 8 a.m. The time admin picks up the time that has been submitted and goes through the process of validating that time and then routing the time to the reports to supervisor for approval. So this is something else that some of the users are unaware of or are forgetting, is that time admin is running every 2 hours. So their timesheet is not going to be sent to their supervisor immediately as soon as they hit submit. It will not be processed until the next time admin process runs. So that's just another thing that you can remind your employees of when they're concerned that their timesheet is stuck or in limbo somewhere. Just remind them of that time admin process that has to run. Then the timesheets that have been approved, that have been submitted, time admin has routed them to the supervisor. Then the supervisor is able to approve the timesheet. So only approved timesheets are going to be sent to payroll for processing. So it's very important that those supervisors are reviewing the timesheets and approving them in a timely manner. So that brings us to one of the issues that we're seeing is that the timesheet is being routed to a supervisor that is unexpected. Maybe it's a reports to supervisor that it was the reports to position is inaccurate or something like that. So we're seeing these tickets come in where with maybe the way that you initially planned to set your employees up was for them to report to a particular supervisor, but then that's not working out well. So the reports to position can be updated by the HR administrator. So if the timesheet is not routing to the anticipated supervisor, then it's very important that you check the HR data pages or you talk to the HR administrator to determine if an update is needed. And it's the HR administrator who is able to update that report to supervisor. The way that the positions are set up and when an employee is hired into a position and they're set up by the HR administrator, there's a reports to position, that's the approver. And then there's also a supervisor field on that position data page. They do not have to be the same person. Oftentimes they are, but it's important for you to keep in mind that it's that reports to field that is impactful to time and attendance. So the reports to is that supervisor who's going to be approving the timesheet. This does not necessarily need to be the same supervisor who handles kind of their day-to-day, supervises them on a day-to-day basis. That reports to is really, is the purpose of that reports to is to approve their time and absences. So the HR administrator can update the reports to with an effective date of the day after conversion, which would be September 25th, if there had not been other job data updates, or just as the job data, they can update it based on the effective date that would be most appropriate. If historical data needs to be corrected, then the HR administrator or the TL administrator can submit a ticket to the Cardinal post-production team, and the PPS team will be able to go in and make those updates in correction mode. But if you are just adding a new row of data with a new effective date, that is something that the HR administrator can do, and that would not require a ticket. This note is very important because there is a lot of confusion about who can approve in Cardinal. So there is not a super user approver in Cardinal. There's not one person who at your agency who can approve all of the timesheets. At the last minute, there was a problem and this person can just go in and approve things. We don't have that in Cardinal. The only person who can approve the timesheet is that reports to supervisor or a designated proxy. So only one person is going to have access to approve that timesheet or those absences, and that's going to be the reports to supervisor, or if a proxy has been designated, then that proxy would be able to approve the timesheet on the behalf of that reports to supervisor. So that brings us to delegation administration, because there are times when that reports to supervisor is going to be out of the office either as a planned vacation or they're going to be out of the office unexpectedly. If the supervisor has a planned, vacation, a planned time that they're going to be out of office, then the supervisor can set up the delegation themselves. But if there is a time when the supervisor is out of the office unexpectedly, then the TL delegation administrator would set up the delegation. So this slide just goes through some of the information about delegation and how delegation administration works. So delegation administration allows managers or supervisors to authorize another supervisor to serve as their proxy and approve time and absences when they are out of the office. When the proxy is delegated, all of the workflow notifications and items are going to be routed to the proxy. I get asked this question a lot. Can I give half of my employees to one supervisor and another half of my employees to another supervisor while I'm away on vacation? The answer to that is no, because the way that delegation is working is that what is being delegated is your entire work list. So it's delegating all of the approvals from one reports to another supervisor. So you can't split that up. It's an all or nothing delegation. Delegation administrators can create, modify, and revoke delegation requests. on behalf of managers or supervisors. When delegation administrators create or modify delegation requests, the effective manager or supervisor and the proxies are going to receive an email notification. So there's not a lot of email notifications that you're getting in Cardinal when it comes to time and attendance, but this is one of those times that you will get an email notification. So when the delegation administrator or the supervisor sets up delegation, then there's going to be an email notification that goes out to the reports to supervisor and also the proxy letting them know. The proxy will have to accept the delegation, and then it will become active. A delegation administrator who also has the TA supervisor role can delegate approval authority on behalf of a manager to themselves. This is really important to remember. Just because you have a delegation administrator role does not mean that you automatically have a supervisor role. The only way that you could be a proxy and approve time for another supervisor is if you also have that supervisor role. So anytime a delegation is being set up either by the supervisor or by the delegation administrator, they have to keep in mind to make sure that the person that they are delegating to is another supervisor and does have that supervisor role in Cardinal. As a TL administrator, you will need to work with the delegation administrator at times to delegate the approvals to the proxy if the reports to is out of the office. The delegation administrator may reach out to you as a TL administrator for assistance. So I'm going to demo the delegation administration process for you because there are a couple of places where we see common mistakes that are happening. So I want to demo that for you. So I'm logging into the training environment. So the way that I'm logging in does look a little bit different, but that's just because I'm using the training environment today for all of my demos. And you'll remember from training that the training environment has data that is staged in it. So some of the dates that we're using, may not be as current. But this is just for demo purposes. Give me 1 second while I get logged in. All right. So we have a job aid for the delegation administrators. It's the TA 372 Delegation Administration Job Aid. And this job aid will walk you through how to add a delegation request. So we're first going to come over to the Navigator. We're going to go to Navigator, Workforce Administration, Self-Service Transactions, Approvals and Delegation, and then Add Delegation Request. Here where it says Administer Delegation, this is where you can kind of view, you could take a look at the delegation requests that are active or inactive at your agency. But right now, we're going to go ahead and add a delegation request. This is a place where there are often mistakes. So here's the first thing that I want to remind you about. I'm going to make this a bit larger so you can see. When we are adding the delegation request, we have to search first by employee ID. The employee ID that we are entering here is the employee ID for the supervisor who we are delegating on behalf of, okay? So I have two supervisors. I have Cosmo Spacely. Cosmo is going on vacation. And so Cosmo, we are going to be delegating Cosmo's approvals to Jack Sparrow. So here I'm going to be entering in Cosmo's employee ID number. You want to make sure that you're entering the supervisor's employee ID number here. All right, then we're going to click the search button. So then you can just always be sure that you've entered everything correctly, because up here at the top in the header section, we see Cosmo Spacely. This is the supervisor. Now I have to select the from and to date. So Cosmo is going on vacation effective tomorrow, Wednesday, through the rest of the week. So he's taking off the 12th through the 14th. So any approvals, any timesheets that are submitted from the 12th to the 14th need to automatically be routed to Jack Sparrow. So we enter the from date and the to date, and then we need to enter the transaction name. So I'm going to click the lookup icon here, and there are 5 different transactions. I'm going to need to add a row because I need to add each of these transactions. So you'll see that each of these gives permission to Jack Sparrow to do different things. So this first one is to manage the approved payable time, then to approve reported time, to manage reported time, to manage absences. So we need to make sure that we're delegating not just one thing, but all of the transactions, so that the supervisor who is the proxy will be able to complete all of Cosmo's work and approve all of the timesheets that come his way. So I'm going to go ahead and select the first one, and then I need to select my proxy. So here I can click on the lookup icon, or I shouldn't have done that because there's so many in here. Here we can enter the employee ID number. So here, for your agency, it's only going to bring up much fewer than the number that my search results brought up. But you'll be able to select based on the employee, the proxy's name, or you can search by looking for the employee ID number. So I'm going to search for it. Here we have Jack Sparrow 125. So that is the appropriate supervisor that's going to act as the proxy. So here we've entered the employee ID number. So again, you could just enter that employee ID number for the proxy, or you could search for it. And then that's going to display the proxy's name. So we know that Cosmo's delegations are then going to be going to Jack from the 12th to the 14th. So I'm going to add another row, and I'm going to do the same thing. Now I'm going to grab the next one and just copy my employee ID number from here. I'm going to go ahead and do the next one. So, oops, I did not mean to do that. I apologize. So it is a little repetitive, but it is very important that you get all of them. And then you want to just double check that your from and to dates are correct. You can't do past, from, and to dates. You can only do future, starting with today's date and any future dates. And then once you have verified that you have all of the transaction names, you all of the from and to dates are correct, you double check that you have the supervisor here that you are delegating on behalf of, and you have the correct proxy, then you click the Save button. Once we have saved it, then both of these supervisors, Cosmo and Jack, are going to get a notification about this delegation. So starting on the 12th, any timesheets that are submitted that would normally be routed to Cosmo are going to automatically be routed to Jack. On the 15th, this delegation will have ended. And so starting on the 15th, Cosmo will then receive any other, everything will then be routed back to Cosmo for approval. So there's nothing that has to be done as long as, Cosmo is out from the 12th to the 14th. If Cosmo ends up coming back early, then this can be revoked. And there are directions on revoking the delegation in the same job aid. So that one thing that is mostly important there is to make sure that you're not delegating, that you're delegating from a supervisor to another supervisor. Next, we want to talk a little bit about the holiday time entry process. So Cardinal is not going to generate a holiday when it falls on the employee's scheduled day off, even if the employee has a set work schedule. So if the employee, so we just had a holiday this week, we had a holiday yesterday. If Monday was not a day that the employee was scheduled to work, Cardinal is not going to generate that holiday for them. But if they were scheduled to work on Monday, then Cardinal is going to generate that holiday for them. All holiday time reporting codes have to add up to the sum of the employee's holiday. The holiday needs to be entered or interfaced when an employee has a variable work schedule. Because remember, those employees that have a variable work schedule, they're set up in Cardinal as working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't have any days off. They don't have certain days that they're scheduled to be working or not working in Cardinal. So Cardinal doesn't know whether they worked the holiday or they didn't work the holiday. So if your employees have a variable work schedule, then they're always going to need to enter the holiday. If your employees have a set work schedule and the holiday falls on a day that they would normally be scheduled to work, so for example, yesterday was a holiday. If your employee has a set work schedule where they work 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, then yesterday being a holiday, Cardinal would generate that holiday for them. So there's nothing that needs to be entered for them as long as they didn't work yesterday. If it's a partial day holiday, it's going to work the same way. So if an employee has a set work schedule and there's a partial holiday, maybe there's a half a day, then the employee is not going to need to enter those hours if that was on a day that they were scheduled to work. Now, holiday time entry can be confusing. So we have a job aid that walks you through these different scenarios. So it'll have a scenario, for example, that is the employee worked on a holiday. How would you enter that in? And it'll walk you through how to enter that in if the employee has a set work schedule or a variable work schedule. So that is that job aid has just been posted in the chat to you. So you'll be able to take a look at that. So anytime your employees have questions about how to enter for a certain holiday, then refer to that job aid because it does break down the different scenarios. a lot of the what-if scenarios are included there. This next slide goes through the time reporting codes. So we have for agencies that are using Cardinal Absence Management, this is that time reporting code that you're going to enter if you need to manually enter holiday hours. It's HOLM. HOS for holiday straight pay, HCS for holiday straight earned, and HNPM for holiday pay docking. Likewise, for agencies that are using an external leave system, so they're not using Cardinal Absence Management, these are the time reporting codes that they will have available on their timesheet. Now we want to take a look at the timesheet report. This is one of those go-to reports, and I know that you've looked at it before, but it's an important one. It's one that has a whole lot of information, so I do want to highlight it for you. This is going to summarize the number of hours by chart field distribution by day. This is most helpful to supervisors and administrators because it provides that record of time that was reported for a pay period for an employee. It's also going to be able to show you the insufficient hours or incomplete timesheets. You'll be able to see whether the timesheet was submitted or was it just saved, and whether it has been approved by the supervisor. The reported hours are going to show by time reporting code, and the chart field distribution is also going to show the entries by day. The approvers and the delegation proxy, so if a proxy approved the time rather than the reports to supervisor, that is also going to show on this report. And it's also going to provide you those productive and non-productive hours that are pending approval. So I want to demo running the timesheet for you as well. So let me jump back in the system. I'm going to log out here because I need to log in using a different user ID. So bear with me for just a second. All right, so to access the timesheet report, we're going to come over here to the navigator. We're going to go to Time and Labor, Reports, and then Timesheet Report. This is going to bring us to the search page to search for the Run Control ID. The Run Control ID allows you to save the parameters of how you want to run the report and save it to a Run Control ID. If you've already run the report, then you can search for the Run Control ID. If you don't enter anything in and you just click the search button, it's going to bring the results. It'll show you all of the run controls that you've already created. In this case, I haven't used this user ID to create a run control, but the run controls are specific to you. So they are not shared within your agency. It's just the run control IDs that you have created, and it's saved for your future use. So because I haven't run this report using this user ID that I'm borrowing from the training today, I need to add a new value. So you're just going to name this whatever you want. So I'm naming it the timesheet demo, but you would name it, whatever is helpful for you. You can't have spaces here, so where I would want to put a space, I use underscores, but you can't have any spaces in the Run Control ID. So now I'm going to click the Add button, and that brings me to the Run Control page. So here I have the Run Control ID that I just entered, and this is where I'm going to select all of the parameters for how I want to run this report. So we can run this report, or we have to run this report by business unit. So I'm going to enter the business unit. And then I have to choose the employee type. I can either run this report for salaried or hourly employees. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to run it for salaried employees. Then I need to select the dates. What dates do I want to include for this report? You can run it to a pay period end date, or you can run it using a from and through date. So whatever is best for your purposes, what you're trying to look at, you can run this report either way. So for this demo, I'm going to run it for a pay period end date. And keep in mind, my pay period end date is in the past because I'm using data that is staged in the training environment. So you'll enter either the from and through date or the pay period end date. Then we can come over here and make our selection on the employees that we want to process. We can run it to just the reports to position number. That's often what supervisors are going to do. A supervisor will often put in their reports to supervisor number here, or their position number here, and then they'll be able to see the timesheet for all, the timesheet report that will include all of their employees. You can also run it for just one employee by entering an employee ID number, or you can run it by department. When I click on the lookup icon, this is going to show me all of the departments. We can also run it agency-wide by entering all 9s. So here I'm going to select to run this report agency-wide. So in department, then you're going to enter 9s all the way across, and that will run it agency-wide. So now I'm going to click the Run button. This is going to bring up the process scheduler request. The default for this report, the format is going to run to CSV. That makes it easy to sort and to view and to manage as an Excel document. The type, I'm going to keep this as web, but you can also email this, have the Cardinal email it to you, or you can print it from here. And then I'm just going to click OK. You'll notice that each time I click OK, then the page is automatically saving. It had that ribbon across the top that said it was saving. So that's just saving any changes that I made to how I want to run this report. And now click the Process Monitor. This is going to bring up the status so I can see if my report's ready. So right now I have a run status, it's processing. I'm looking for a run status of success and a distribution status of posted. So this page isn't going to refresh on its own, but you can just click that refresh button and then you can see when that report is ready. Now I'm going to go to my report manager. The report manager is going to list all of the reports that I have run in the last day, is how it's set to default. You can change that and you can look at the last week. So reports will stay here and display in your report manager for 30 days. So I'm just going to click on the report title. And then that's going to open up the file list. So I'm going to click on the CSV link. This is going to download it as an Excel document. It opened on my other screen, so I'm going to pull that over for you. All right, so here is our timesheet report. I'm going to expand a few of these columns just so that we can take a closer look. All right, so one thing that you're going to want to do is put a filter on the row. So row 13 is where we have our headers. And if we come to data, we can add a filter. And now I can very easily sort my, my data. So we have the pay period. If we had used from and through dates, that would show here as well, letting you know the dates that we're looking at. Here in the header section, we can see those dates. We can also see that we ran this agency-wide. All right, so we have the department. This report also will show you who the reports to supervisor is. So we do get questions about how can I easily see who the reports to supervisors are for different employees. This is a great report to run because you'll be able to see the reports to supervisors. We can also see the employee ID number, the reports to supervisor's name. We can see the employee's position number, the employee's name, and then here we can see their work group. And then we can see their work schedule. So this is another great report. If you are reviewing work schedules, you're trying to determine if updates are needed, then this is another report where you can look to see the work schedules that your employees have and their rotation ID, so you can see what days they're off. Then we have the pay group, their time reporting, whether they're exception or positive time reporters. Then you can see these are the time reporter codes that have been entered, so regular hours. Then there's a description. Once reported time is processed by the time admin process, then that reported time becomes payable time. So here you're able to see the payable time reporting code and the description of that payable time. Then in columns X and Y, you're seeing the hours or the override hours. Column Z tells you who entered it. This is going to show the user ID that entered those hours on the timesheet. If a proxy approves the time, then here in column AA, you're going to see the proxy who approved the time. All right, columns AB and AC, those are ones that we definitely want to take a look at. These are the reported time statuses and the payable time statuses. The reported time status of SB means that this time has been submitted. What you're wanting to look out for is any time that is in the status of SV or saved, because if the time is saved, then time admin is not going to be triggered to process it. So saved time is not going to be routed to the supervisor for approval. So if you sort on column AB for the code SB, you will be able to reach out to these employees. So over here, we can see that this is Bobby Penn. We need to reach out to Bobby Penn and tell Bobby that he needs to submit his timesheet. All right, so I'm going to clear that filter. And let's take a look at the payable time. So payable time in this report, we see AP, which means the time has been approved. We see NA, that needs approval. VS is salary hold. So here we can filter. Remember, we're wanting to pay close attention to what needs approval, particularly if we're near the end of the pay period. So we would look and we'd see all this time needs to be approved. So we could come over here and see who's the reports to supervisor. So we've got John Doe and Jenny Jones. We would want to reach out to them as TL administrators and remind them that the end of the pay period is approaching and they have timesheets that need approval. The source just lets you know that this time was entered online. You can also see any exceptions, and then the rest of this report off to the right is including those chart field details. So if chart fields were entered, you'll see those details here. So the timesheet report has a ton of information. This is a great report to run as you are reviewing time, making sure that those deadlines are being met and making sure that timesheets are being approved in a timely manner. So that leads us into a few other demos that I want to walk us through. These other demos are to target a few common issues that we're seeing. I'm going to walk through 4 demos with you. The first 3 are all related to absences. So I do know that not everyone in the audience today is using Cardinal Absence Management. So I just ask that you bear with me for a few minutes while I walk through these 3 absence-related demos. And then the 4th demo that I'm going to do in this section is updating a work schedule, and that does impact everyone. So we're going to jump back over to the training environment. And the first demo that I want to walk you through is creating an absence event when there's a partial day, because this is something that employees are making mistakes on quite often. So I just want to demo this as a quick review for you. So I'm going to go back home. I'm going to go to the team time tile. And we are going to enter an absence for Mary Sue. One of the first mistakes that we're seeing that employees are making is they're wanting to enter their absence on the timesheet grid. And for agencies that are using Cardinal Absence Management, absences must be entered on the Absence tab. So we go to the Absence tab, and then we click the Add Absence Event. We need to make sure that the absence that we're entering, that we are on the correct timesheet. So right now I'm looking at the timesheet for the week of November 29th, 2021. So the absence that I enter here has to fall between 11:29 and 12:05. If I want to enter an absence for another week, then I would just first need to navigate to that timesheet before I can enter the absence event. So this employee is going to take half a day absence on Monday. So 11:29 is correct. The end date is also here, 11:29. I'm going to select the absence name. Also, employees are getting confused. They're looking for annual leave in this list. And in Cardinal, annual leave is vacation. So they need to select the absence name, vacation, and the reason as vacation. When we take a partial day absence, we have to enter that as a partial day, because if we don't, if we just forecast it here, Cardinal is going to generate 8 hours for this absence. So this is where we go to the details link. And we can review here the start date and the end date, our absence name and reason, and then partial days. The default is none. So by default, Cardinal is going to generate a full day absence. But here I'm going to select all days. The reason I'm selecting all days is because this partial day is impacting all of the days of the absence, because this absence is just one day, it's all days. So I'm just going to select the all days option. Then I get a new field. This is all days hours. Here I can enter my 4 hours and then click the calculate end date or duration button, and Cardinal will generate the 4 hours as the duration. Here you can enter a comment, or the employee can enter a comment if they want, but it is not required. And then we're going to click the OK button. Now we can review. We can see the start end dates. We see the duration was pulled over. This is 4 hours. And then we're going to forecast. When we forecast, this is when Cardinal's checking to make sure that the employee does have the sufficient balance. When the page refreshes, you'll see that forecast message. So here it's forecast successful. The important thing to remember is that as soon as you create the absence event, you need to submit it right away. If you don't submit it right away, it's automatically going to remain in saved status. And remember, if it's saved, it's not going to route to the supervisor, and it's also going to keep the timesheet from being able to be submitted if there's a saved absence. So we are going to receive our forecast successful message and click the submit button. We get our submit confirmation, we click OK. Because this employee is an exception time reporter, we also have to enter the regular hours that are being worked on Monday, the 29th. So I'm going to scroll over. When I submitted the timesheet, Cardinal automatically deleted any of those extra rows that weren't used. This is something that sometimes employees get confused about. You scroll all the way over to the right, then you can just add another row. And we can add those 4 regular hours that the employee worked. And now we're going to submit the timesheet again. There is a hesitancy that we hear about from employees that they're hesitant to submit their timesheet multiple times, but there's no problem with that. When you submit an absence, you have to submit it, and then when you make any edits or changes to the timesheet, you need to make those submit the timesheet again. This does not cause additional work for the supervisor. The supervisor is just going to have to approve whatever has been changed or whatever is new. So it doesn't cause additional work if the employee submits their timesheet more often. Now we can see that the absence status has updated from saved. Now it says needs approval. The reported time tab, I can see that the time has been submitted. That's what I'm looking for. All right, now I'm going to go and search for another employee to show you another common mistake. So this is Janice Hunt. Janice entered an absence event, but she didn't submit it. It's in saved status. So what happens when the timesheet is when the absence event is in saved status is it will keep the employee from being able to submit the regular hours that are on the timesheet as well. So now we can see that the 4 regular hours are saved and the absence is saved. So in order for this timesheet to be submitted, the employee has to submit this absence event. So to submit this absence event, we're going to scroll across to the right and click the forecast button. Even if the employee had already forecasted it, because they didn't submit it right away, they have to forecast it again. So now we have the forecast successful message, and we can click the submit button. Now I'll click OK, and now I can see that my absence has been routed to approval. The 4 regular hours have now been submitted. So when time admin runs, it's going to pick this timesheet up and route it for approval. Another common mistake. So now we have another employee, Mary Sue 79, and what Mary did here is Mary had an absence for December 3rd vacation. She was going to take 8 hours of vacation. And then she was really not sure that she had entered it correctly, and she got nervous because she's new, so she canceled the event. So now the event is in a canceled status, but she really needs to actually submit this. Now she's reviewed her job aids, and she realizes that she had entered it correctly, but now she can't get it to submit because it's in canceled status. This is a little bit tricky. Because what we have to do is we have to flip this one from canceled status to saved before we can submit it. So we have to edit it. So we're going to scroll over to the right, click the edit button, and we can't forecast it right away because it's still in a status of canceled. So what we have to do is edit something on the event. So we can change the absence name. If we just change it to sick, change the reason to sick, and see my status is still canceled. And then we save it for later. This is going to flip it out of canceled status now to saved status. Well, she doesn't really want to use sick leave. She really wants to use vacation leave, and that's fine. Now she can edit it back to vacation. And that pop-up message that I quickly clicked OK on was just saying, hey, you changed the absence name. And I clicked OK because that's what I wanted to do. Now we are able to forecast, and once we get our forecast successful message, we can submit that right away. And then we click the OK button. So when there's a canceled event, the tricky piece is that you have to edit it, change it to something else so that it just flips it from canceled status to saved status, and then you edit it again to update it to whatever is appropriate for that absence event. Then you can forecast it and submit it. And we do have job aids for the employees to walk them through how to create and edit these absence events. But I wanted to just show you and highlight a few of the common issues that we're seeing people make. All right, so those of you who are not using Cardinal Absence Management, thank you for bearing with us as we hit on those 3 common mistakes. Now we're going to take a look at how to update an employee's work schedule. Supervisors, TL admins, and TL setup administrators can all update an employee's work schedule. To update an employee's work schedule, we are going to go to Navigator. Because the navigation remembers where I was last, I'm just going to use this button here to go back to the root. So I'm going to go to Time and Labor, Enroll Time Reporters, and then Assign Work Schedule. Then I'm going to have to enter the employee ID number or use the search fields to search for the employee. So we're going to update Cosmo's work schedule. Cosmo Spacely, who was our supervisor that we worked with earlier, we are going to update his work schedule. So when we enter the search criteria, we will be taken to the Assign Work Schedule page. So here we have the employee's name in the header section, and we can see the employee's current schedule. This has an effective date of March 25th, 2021. The effective date that you are going to see is going to be the conversion date, which is 9/24/2022. So when you go to the Assign Work Schedule page, you'll have 1 row of data, unless another work schedule has already been added, but you'll have 1 row of data with an effective date of 9/24. If that work schedule needs to be updated because the work schedule that was assigned at conversion is not accurate, you can add a new work schedule with an effective date of the following day. Or depending on the situation of why you're updating the work schedule, if the work schedule is, because the employee's work schedule is changing later on, maybe it was correct, but now it is changing, then you would just use the effective date for the change. But you're able to add in a new row with a new effective date by adding a row. The effective date is going to auto-populate to the system date, which is today's date. So I can update that. So if, let's say, the work schedule that was assigned at conversion was wrong, you're going to add a new effective dated row that is effective on 9/25/2022. The assignment method is always going to be select predefined schedule. The schedule group here is state for a set work schedule. Then the schedule ID, you can use the lookup icon to find the appropriate schedule ID. The first 2 digits are the number of hours. So if I wanted, if he's still going to be working a 40-hour work week, then I could say that the schedule ID begins with 40. That will bring me all of the set work schedules that have a 40-hour work week. Then if his work schedule is really, maybe his work schedule is changing to where he's going to be working 4 10-hour days, then I would look for a 40-hour work schedule with 4 days a week at 10 hours a day. This one is a rotating schedule. Also use the description 4/10. And so here I can see that this is a 4 days a week at 10 hours a day with 3 days off scattered, or 4 days a week, 10 hours a day with 3 days off together. So this is the work schedule that I want to change him to, because he works Monday through Thursday, 10 hours a day, and he's off Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So this is the appropriate schedule. So I'm going to select that schedule ID. I have the description here, and then I can select the rotation ID. So I'm selecting Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but if you had a different rotation for your employee, you would just make the appropriate selection here. The show schedule link is really helpful because it's going to show you at a glance. This is particularly helpful when you have an employee that's working a rotating schedule, where week 1, maybe they're off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and week 2, they're off, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. This will help you get a glimpse of that. So this is just giving you that bird's eye view, or that snapshot picture of what the work schedule looks like. So we can see he's scheduled Monday through Thursday, 10 hours a day. He's off Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I'm going to click OK. And then I will save it. So you, as the TL administrator, TL setup administrator, or supervisor, can add a new effective dated work schedule. You cannot go and edit a work schedule that's already there, but you can add a new one. And we have a job aid that will walk you through this as well. And we're going to drop that in the chat. We'll drop that in the chat in just a moment. All right, that brings us to our QA. So we do have questions that have been rolling in. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam, and she's going to facilitate our QA with our panelists, Claire and Kranti.
All right. Thank you, Susie. Give me a moment. Let's see what questions have not been answered. All right. We have a question from Manish from State Corporation Commission. We are an interfacing agency. My question is regarding sending the transaction for updating the reports to. Do we have to take the pay period in consideration before sending such transactions? We just hit a scenario where we sent a data change transaction on 10/7 with the effective date of 9/24 and got a warning, a transaction DTA with an effective date that is less than the open pay period and greater than the current max effective dated row in Cardinal job data. And that is more of an HR question, Manish. So if you want to take that question and submit a VCCC ticket for HR to explain what happened, they will do so. All right. Some questions that have already been answered in the Q&A, but we'll go ahead and read out loud. We have a question from Shelley. When delegation requests have been completed, will the original supervisor still see the request between the delegation dates? And the answer is, while the delegation is active, only the proxy will receive the approvals in their pending approvals tile. The original supervisor cannot approve during this time. The original supervisor can revoke the delegation in order to get the approval authority back if needed before the delegation end date. We have another question. If timesheets have already been submitted prior to delegation, do employees need to resubmit the timesheets after the proxy has been designated for it to go to the proxy? The employees do not have to resubmit the delegation. That is the answer. I'm sorry. Actually, there was a correction to that answer. The employees do not have to resubmit the timesheet, not the delegation. Then we had a question from Diane. Do all TL administrators have this capability? Their agency is VSP. The response is the ability to delegate on behalf of one supervisor to another is granted to users with the delegation administrator role, a separate role from the TL administrator role. However, all reports to supervisors have the ability to delegate their own approval authority to their supervisors or peers.
Hi, this is Maggie Rice from the Cardinal team. I just want to add one thing into that. Note that it said that a supervisor or a reports to can delegate to their peers or to their supervisor. And the key there is not to delegate down, because then you may get into a situation where the employee is asked to approve their own timesheet. So be very careful when you're determining who is going to approve in your stead.
Thank you, Maggie. Still looking, seeing the questions that are coming in. There was a question, and I'm sure many people have this question. Will a copy of the slideshow be distributed or available on the Cardinal Project website? The slide and recording will be provided as a follow-up shortly after this meeting. So be on the lookout for that. We have another question from Monica. Do you know of a Cardinal report that has wage employee total hours for the pay period, just like the SIPS batch report? I found a report that has the hours per day and another for the work week, but I'm looking for totals for the pay period.
So to answer that question, I have asked to look at the payroll data extract, but that's more of has lines by chart field values, by earning code, by FLSA period. But if that's not what you're looking for, if you're looking for total hours by pay period as one line item, then you can run the payroll register that has the by employee, by earning code hours, total hours by pay period. So I'm gonna type that in as a response too, so you could run that report that gives totals for, and use that only for wage employees, because the salary is paid even before the timesheets are sent. You might not get the right results for salaried employees.
How far in the future can employees make absence requests? This came in by Kristen. And the response is absences can be entered up to 90 days in the future. All right. Okay, next question. Heather Hall. We are a DBHDS agency and are using Kronos as our timekeeping system. All of our employees are set to variable schedules after the conversion. Do we need to change these schedules or leave as is? Do we need to complete this transaction for each new hire?
No, that is not needed for agencies that are interfacing time and not using Cardinal absence management. They are all enrolled in a positive time reporting work group, which means the schedules are not used to generate hours. We take the time that's coming in from the timesheet. So all interfacing agencies are okay to enroll the employees in a variable schedule. They don't have to maintain schedules in Cardinal.
All right, our next question is from Laura. Is there a report that shows employees that have not submitted any time for the salary time period?
I think we have a couple of reports. One is a timesheet exception report and scheduled exception report, and also the timesheet report. The standard timesheet report can be used to identify that.
We have another question about the TA restricted special approval role. Kranti, could you just explain that since there's some confusion around that role?
So what we have found out is when there are issues with the reports to field on job data in certain cases, and also when the supervisor does not have a user profile, and it happens in certain scenarios where you have just hired a new supervisor and there are people reporting to him, and even before a user profile is created, if someone entered that time in that short window, what used to happen is the time was getting automatically approved with no one approving it. So we have found about this problem and we've been working for a solution to address this. And what we have done is we have modified our time and labor approval workflow engine, which looks for the actual supervisor to route the approval, but it cannot find the approver. Then the next step that we have made sure is to find a delegation admin in the agency. And if there are multiple delegation admins, it becomes a pooled work list, and that work list for a supervisor with missing user profile will go to the agency delegation admins. That's the step 2. But we have even found cases where some agencies do not have the delegation admins. So the third step we have put in is to find out agencies that do not have this. And when there is a scenario when a supervisor does not have a profile and when the agency does not have a delegation admin, and only in that case, the work list item is sent to the TA restricted approver role. And the approver has to identify who that employee is, who is the supervisor, try to find out what is the issue with the approval. I mean, if you have questions, you could log a ticket when these things get routed to you, and the PPS team should be able to help you out to identify if that was an issue with the supervisor position, or if that's an issue, timing issue, whether a profile wasn't created at that time when the employee submitted time, or if the agency is missing a delegation admin. Based on that, the TA restricted approver should make sure that these issues are addressed, so the time will get flowed to the right person next time.
And just give us a second. We're just checking to see what other questions we have in the queue. All right, one more question.
So one reminder, I think there were some questions or comments that Pam has made in the chat. We just want to address that. So for payroll service bureau agencies that serve as the AM administrator for all the PSB agencies. They should reference to the handouts provided for the agency versus bureau responsibilities and follow the guidelines provided in the document. So our training was addressing in common for all agencies. We were not focusing on PSB versus non-PSB, but I know the responsibilities differ based on if the agency has a PSB service or not. So please do refer to that agency versus bureau responsibilities if you are using PSB.
All right, so lots of great questions. Thank you for sending those in. If we did not get to your question or if it wasn't answered, then you can submit that ticket through the CCC and we will respond to your questions. A couple of things that I just wanted to hit on, just kind of coming to review a couple of things. I did post the link to the TL Setup Administrator, TL Setup Job Aid, and that is the job aid, if you look towards the end, where we do provide those step-by-step instructions on creating or maintaining work schedules. Another job aid that I want to bring your attention to is the approving time and absences job aid. And the reason I want to highlight this job aid, and I'm going to drop this link in the chat as well. 1 second. Okay, I'm dropping this in the chat as well. This is the job aid that if you scroll all the way to the end, you will see all of the statuses for reported time and payable time that you're seeing on those reports. So that SV code, that's for saved, SV submitted, NA needs approval, AP approved. And then we get lots of questions about these payable time statuses. VS is salary hold, and that is a good one to see. That means that your employees are going to get paid. The salary base pay is going to be processed during general ledger distribution. Another one that we get questions about is TP, taken by payroll. That means that things have been sent over to payroll for processing. So the details are now with payroll for processing. So just wanted you to know where you can access these statuses here in the approving time and absences job aid. We just saw a question, what does it mean, rejected by payroll?
So once we run time admin, the time is moved from reported timetable to the payable timetable. And then we have another process called load time and labor. What it does is it takes the data from payable time and it moves the data to payroll. So it looks for anything that's approved and that's ready to be paid. It is going to be sent to payroll. So once that process finishes, it updates the status to taken by payroll. But when this program is trying to load the payable time to payroll, it is looking for several things to make sure they're all correct, based on employees' job data, based on the TRC that is reported. So if there is any kind of timing issue where the config has changed after you have reported the TRC, it's no longer a valid earning code for that agency because they have earnings programs defined. There are several reasons why a transaction gets rejected. So it really means that there is something wrong with this employee's time and payroll has not accepted that time. So it's something that the agency has to deal with SPO to figure out why the transaction got rejected. And if that's something the employee needs to be paid, and yeah, you have to make sure that the issue is resolved and SPO has reloaded that. I'm sure SPO will be checking for those. But if you have seen that before the payroll confirmation, you can reach out to SPO to figure out the reason. And that's one reason why it happens, why the transaction gets to rejected by payroll. I think there is another scenario. What happened last week, I think a communication was sent out because a lot of agencies were seeing this rejected by payroll and were asking questions on why that is rejected by payroll. So once we load the data to payroll, if we see that something is wrong with the time data that has been loaded, before we certify or confirm the payroll, before we run the calcs, we have an option to unsheet the data that has been loaded to payroll. So if we found out that something is wrong or it was loaded at a wrong time, like what happened last week was we had an off-cycle payroll in between for wage, but before we ran the off-cycle, we loaded the next on-cycle time. So we can't do that. So SPO has to do an unsheet of all the loaded time. So when anytime we do an unsheet, everything that's taken by payroll goes to rejected by payroll until it's reloaded again. So it's rejected by payroll. You have to be careful, but in that one scenario, everything wasn't rejected by payroll because SPO did an unsheet. And if this happens again, I'm sure they're gonna send communication out to agencies not to worry about the status. But in general, if you see RP, please reach out to SPO to see why it's rejected by payroll.
All right, thanks, Kranti. We have another question that someone was wanting me to review the path to access the work schedule. So I'm going to show you the job aid where I did drop this link, but if we go to page 26 of the TA 372 TL setup overview job aid, and I want to point it out here because I want to make sure everyone understands how to follow the paths that are in the job aids. We're going to go to page 26. And we always provide the path for you. So we're going to start at the navigator, then go to time and labor, enroll time reporters. I'm sorry, that is not the page I wanted to be on. I apologize for that confusion. Well, in this case, the work schedule path is not here. Okay, well, I'm going to demo it for you then, and then we're going to add it to that job aid. I apologize for that. I wanted to make sure we could use all of our tools, but we will be updating that one. My apologies for that. Okay, so again, the navigator remembers where you are, so I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning, and I'll walk you all the way through. All right, so we're going to go to time and labor. Enroll time reporters, and then assign work schedule. And this will take you to that assign work schedule search page where you can search for the employee. So you'll search for the employee based on their employee ID or their name. So we searched for Cosmo earlier. Then you're going to click the search button, and that will bring you to that assign work schedule page where you can add a new work schedule. There is that minus button here. You do not have correction mode, so you will not be able to delete it or remove it, but you can add additional work schedules, and you just want to pay close attention to that effective date when you do so to make sure that you update that effective date appropriately. And I believe that the navigation has been posted for you. I believe that wraps up all of our questions from the QA. So now I just want to highlight a few of our training materials. Here on slide 18, we do have these hyperlinked for you, and we will be sending, as we mentioned earlier, we will be sending this deck out to you. But all of our training materials and job aids are available on the Cardinal Project website under Learning. And the ones that we've talked about today, this holiday time entry scenario, this one is the one that I mentioned that's going to go through different scenarios and help your employees identify how to enter their hours if there is a holiday. You know, if they worked the holiday, if they didn't work the holiday, they have a variable schedule. It's going to cover all of that. It's very detailed and very specific. So this is a job aid you're probably going to need to have handy this week since we had a holiday this week. If you get questions about entering chart field details, we have a job aid that specifically addresses that. TA 372, the Delegation Administration job aid. There is another job aid specifically for supervisors for delegating. So there's one targeted for TL administrators. That's the one that's linked here. And there is another one that is delegation administration for supervisors that your supervisors will be using. Then we have the time entry scenario job aids. We have one for exception time reporters and one for positive time reporters. These are to assist them in entering time and absences. So these are the job aids that they'll refer to when they have questions about how to enter an absence event using partial days. All of those steps are provided in those job aids. Another thing, just while we're here, that I want to remind you about, employees can access their timesheets and make updates to their timesheets 90 days in the past, 90 days in the future. So even if their timesheet has already been approved, they can still make updates and submit it. And when time admin runs, it will process it and route it to their supervisor. So employees are able to make changes to their timesheets even if they've already been submitted. Supervisors also have that 90-day access, 90 days in the past, 90 days in the future. TL administrators, all of you have a little bit more access. You have access 365 days. So you have a full year access to timesheets. A couple of the reports and queries that we highlighted, that timesheet report, then we also have that timesheet exception query. The timesheet exception query is really useful in identifying timesheet exceptions after time admin has run. You can then make corrections and updates to the timesheets to clear any of those timesheet exceptions to make sure that your employees are paid correctly. Because running queries and running reports is a little bit different, and running a query may not be that intuitive at first, we do have a job aid that will walk you through how to run a query. And so that's the NAV 225 running an HCM query. And this will walk you through how to run the queries. We have a ton of reports and queries that are available to you. So the reports catalog is also on the Cardinal Project website. And that's where we would, direct you to go to check out the reports catalog. That will have the path to run, the path that will show you how to navigate to the report and the query. It'll also provide you a description of the report and the query and how it can be used. So that will be very helpful for you as well. And that has been posted in the chat. And I would recommend you grab that link and you save it, because you'll be visiting the reports catalog pretty often here in the beginning, especially as you're looking for particular reports to run. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Sam, and she's going to talk through some additional support that is available.
All right, so let's go ahead and go over the additional support. There are several support resources that are available to you. First, we'll talk about agency support. You do have a point person at your agency that has been working hand in hand with Cardinal. So for agency guidelines on utilizing agency-centered resources to resolve issues and questions, you'll need to follow your agency's guidelines on that. And if you don't know, please contact your point person for Cardinal. Also, agency contacts are equipped to address agency-specific details, including agency system usage, agency-specific TA attributes, policies, and procedures. We also have our wonderful user labs that are open currently. For our user lab schedule, you will please refer to the Cardinal message board when you first log into Cardinal, as well as the Cardinal Project website that gets updated with our current user lab schedule. But the in-person user labs are for all HCM functional areas and are offered here at the Cardinal Project office in Paragon Place in Richmond. And here we will have Cardinal Project trainers that are available to assist core users with their transactions and any questions that they may have. We also have our module subject matter experts available as needed. And your last line of defense is your VCCC help desk ticket. If you cannot attend in-person user labs, but you still need additional support, you can enter a Cardinal help desk ticket requesting assistance and providing details on the functional area. Please include the word Cardinal as well as the module area in the subject line so that the ticket can be routed to the appropriate area. And then someone will reach out to you, either providing you with guidance or offering you an opportunity to do a screen share so they can show you how to do whatever it is you're requesting. All right, so now it is time to wrap up our meeting. Before we do that, we have a little comment from Maggie Rice.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for attending the forum with us today. We will be having additional forums throughout the next couple of weeks. Later on today, there will be a forum for benefit administrators. Next week, there will be a forum for time and absence management administrators, and we'll also be addressing retirees. And later this week, there's an HR administrator forum as well. I see we did get a request for a payroll administrator forum. We don't have that planned currently, but we'll look into adding that. So thank you so much for attending the forum, and hopefully this was helpful. Have a great day.
Thank you all.